VCU Butler, Final Four action. Who do you like and why?
Well, we're not going to like a side, but we're going to like a total in this game, and this is the Cinderella ball.
So you're holding your best bet back for Saturday's pregame pros.
You're sharp. Can't get anything by this guy. Well,
we got a lot of good things to talk about.
We do. In this situation with this game, I mean, this is the two Cinderella teams. You got a number 8 seed playing a number 11 seed. You know, never.
All right, so let's talk about this because there's been some real historic results into this Final Four. One, this is only the VCU is only the third team since some of these are 31 years, some are 32 years. Doesn't really matter. I think this one's 31. 31 years that only the third team in the Final Four seeded worse than 8. Okay, and actually, surprisingly, all 3 were 11 seeds. We had George Mason a few years ago, and then LSU, you probably remember way back in 1986. So,
You go way back in 1986.
So that is interesting. It's also interesting that the winner of this game is going to be in the finals, and it'll be the first time in, I think, 26 years since Villanova played in '85 that a seed worse than number 6 is in the finals. So it has really been an upset-laden tournament, especially from the Sweet 16 on. So what I'm interested from you is how do you handicap that? And I've been asking this on the podcast, is do you look at this and say, okay, something's changed fundamentally, or do you look at it as an aberration and you're not going to adjust your handicapping?
Well, you can't. If you make adjustments off of one season, you're really asking for trouble. I think 1 year is not a big enough sampling size. It's to me, it's just a trend. You know, you need a couple years for it to become a true pattern. One thing that I will say, and me and you've talked about it, and it's something that's got to be emphasized, with these kind of schools like Butler's and the Virginia Commonwealths, why they do so well in the tournaments now as opposed to maybe 10 years ago is the landscape of college basketball. The blue chip programs just don't have guys that stay for the duration. But these programs, they're not attracting that upper echelon athlete. They're good athletes, but these are guys that aren't going to necessarily be first rounders in the NBA. So they're staying in school, and you're seeing them for 3 or 4 years, and it gives you a continuity with a team and experience and leadership, and that's priceless here.
So you're telling me about specific fundamental elements that's changed, but then you said, well, I'm not changing at all. So the assumptions that you just put forth, you entered this March Madness with, they haven't been reinforced at all?
They're reinforced now. This is something that I've seen started to change. I think when you look at this tournament, underdogs have done so well the whole way through.
And we had another stat. If you would have blindly played every dog since the round of 64, you'd be up 7 units on the money line. If you had blindly played every favorite on the money line, you'd be down 21 units.
Wow. But I think moving forward, I think these kind of teams need to get more credibility in the line. I think that's the one thing I will take is the mid-major teams.
Well, that's the whole point. So what you're saying is the core element of sports betting is what is the perception of the team that's shown by the line versus the reality. So you're saying these teams are undervalued.
The mid-majors.
All right, which it sounds like you thought it entering the tournament, and it's been reinforced to you. So you'll go into next year's March Madness, give an extra credence to the mid-majors.
Absolutely. I mean, stop and think about it for a second. I mean, how hard is it for any team to make it to the Final Four in back-to-back years? Any team, blue chip program, whatever. But then when you consider what Butler's done, it makes it that much more amazing because this is a team from mid-major, and like I said, you know, give them credit, give this coach credit. This guy's sitting on a major payday, so they're going to become courting this guy when the season's in.
Okay, so we have 2 mid-majors here, so in a way, whatever you think of mid-majors, we'll be saving for the Monday, which I assume you'll be doing a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning webcam for the Monday championship game,
Sometime Sunday we'll get it out
Sunday
there.
morning, is the fact of the matter is, then it's going to be marquee BCS conference, whoever it is, Kentucky or UConn versus mid-major. We got two mid-majors. So what are the key factors in this game, and,
Well,
and what makes you like the total?
The one key factor in this game, and obviously John Q. Public's going to zero in on this, the experience factor of Butler. You know, you can't put a price on the fact that they were here last year and went through all of the nervousness, the jitters of playing on the biggest stage. Absolutely March Madness from each round, there's more pressure, but the Final Four is just like another event. And so that's going to be an advantage for them. And it's also the reason why I like the total in this game. I think that if Virginia Commonwealth does come out with a little bit of jitters, that Butler is going to be able to dictate their tempo because they're going to be the calm team at the beginning of the game. And we talk so many times about how a game starts to play out. If this game plays out at the beginning the way I do, where Butler controls
the way you expect.
The way I expect. Butler's going to control the tempo. It's going to start it into a slower paced game, and that will continue throughout.
So what tempo do you think VCU wants to play at?
Virginia Commonwealth has shown in this tournament that they can play both ways. I think if they play in a half-court tempo, it benefits Butler more. I also think with this is the first time in the tournament that we've got almost a full week of preparation time going to Saturday to play. Both coaches will be able to come up with defenses to stop the strengths. One thing that Virginia Commonwealth has done very well in this tournament is shoot the three.
So you think the prep time helps the defense?
Yes. Also, when we've talked about fatigue factors. If you watch the end of the Kansas-Virginia Commonwealth game last week, both teams were, I mean, every time out, you had the guys, grabbing their knees, like just, busting for wind, short on air. But amazingly enough, it was the Kansas players that looked more fatigued at the end of that game, and it showed in their foul shooting. That was the difference in that game at the end. Kansas was horrible from the line.
I agree with you that the Final Four is a higher pressure environment. But just from what I've seen of the VCU coach, it seems like that taking it one game at a time and taking it all in stride is one of the things he does best. So against a random, inexperienced Final Four coach, I would agree with you. I actually believe that VCU, I'm not saying that Butler doesn't have a coaching advantage. I don't know enough to really judge the expertise of the coaches. I mean, clearly Butler went to the Final Four or championship game last year. We know that much. The VCU coach doesn't strike me, as a Steeler fan, and I brought this up on a recent show. I think it was with Sack on a podcast. And if you don't check that out, you can check out pregamepodcast.com and get all of our podcasts. To me, the analogy is Bill Cowher. Bill Cowher, Steeler coach, former Steeler coach, great regular season coach, great energy, but he got the team tight in the playoffs, and he really underperformed in the playoffs throughout his tenure. It seems like the VCU coach is the opposite, and that makes me optimistic that they're kind of playing with house money. I'm not sure if I agree with that, but it feels like, I'm not sure psychologically I would feel that way, but it seems like the team does.
One advantage that Virginia Commonwealth has in this game is they're still the underdog, okay? And when I handicap, my style of handicapping, I look at things and I view teams, how their psyche is going into a game, differently if they're a favorite or an underdog. With Virginia Commonwealth, dog the whole way through from the start. Remember, this is a team that had to play their way into the big dance.
They were underdogs in the first game.
They were underdogs there, and they've been underdogs since. Butler has been an underdog in every game.
That's right.
Until now. Mm-hmm. And so now almost, if you're Butler, do you get a false sense of security that we've been the underdog the whole way, we got it done, a lot of narrow wins in this game. They could have lost to Old Dominion, they could have lost to Pitt very easily. Both those games were decided basically on the last plays of the game. And here we are now, one game away from going back to the championship game, and we're the favorite, meaning psychologically we're supposed to win. Does that give them, let their guard down a little bit?
think that's a valid point. To me, and this is a point, I actually did a video conference with Chad Millman for ESPN.com. It should be up soon. And one of the points he loved that we talked about was, I was listening to Jay Kornegay on the radio yesterday, the Hilton Sportsbook director, and he said he has massive exposure on VCU. In fact, he actually texted back to the radio station. I was talking to the guys from ESPN Radio here in town. They said he texted back and said he had a $10 ticket out at 5,000 to 1 on VCU from early in the season. So $50,000 exposure on that one $10 ticket at 5,000 to 1. Let's think about this. He was hinting at it. He said, well, we're going to do some stuff to massage our exposure. Well, what does that mean? That means he wants, and most people probably are in a similar spot, most bookies, meaning VCU would be the real damaging win on the future side. Because VCU was in the field for for the Hilton too, eventually. So in the field, a lot of people just will take a flyer with the field. And so my thought is, if he's trying to induce Butler action, which makes sense, because if VCU wins, now they're still exposed going into the finals, but at least they had a nice win on Butler, right? And then if Butler ends up, if VCU or if Butler wins, yeah, they lose that side, that game, but they also avoid the exposure on VCU. So this is kind of a finance concept, but if the market is actually adjusted incorrectly for the side action, meaning that they're going to create a side number to get disproportionate action to try to compensate for another market, which is the future market. All of a sudden now, as a bettor, you don't have to worry about their future exposure. You get to play Butler at 2.5 or 2 or whatever, which makes me think that the true line on this Butler game is a little bit higher, and they're keeping it low because they're trying to induce Butler action.
When I did my lines for the games, I actually had Butler at 4 is what I thought the game would come out at. I was surprised that it was this low. I was right on the money in the Kentucky game, but this one I was off 1.5 points.
So that speaks to the idea that they're saying, yeah, we know we're going to get disproportionate Butler. We want disproportionate Butler, which also means if you back Butler, you're probably getting up, 1.5 points of value just to start with, because of the fact of them trying to hedge their exposure. It's an interesting concept.
Yeah, it's, if I'm that guy that's got that $10 ticket, I know I'm doing some hedging if I was him.
Closing thoughts.
Closing thoughts, I think it's going to be a defensive game, slow tempo. I'm going to go with the game under the total. The over-under actually opened at 131 and went to 133. I know we talk a lot about early moves being sharp money. I think that when we get down to these final 2 games, most people bet overs that are going to bet. It's human nature, and I think I'm happy that the line went to 133. I think it's giving us more value. I'm going to take the game under. I have it at 127 for a total.
Now remember, is when there's an early move, it's wise guys making the move, but there's 2 possibilities. One is they like the side, or 2, they're getting ahead of what they see as the public move. The fact that this was a move towards the over at least opens the door to the fact that they're going to buy back later. We don't know for sure, but it does open the door to that.
Absolutely.
All right, it's your turn to continue the conversation in the comment section with Marco and me. And next up, yeah, you guessed it, we're going to be talking about the next Final Four matchup, Kentucky-UConn.